Recently, I had a very big surprise from Aune. It was something that completely took me out of the blue. It was something that I was totally unexpecting. Now, Aune, over the past year, 2 or 3 years, they've really been concentrating on the headphone market. They've released some absolutely fantastic products that have been receiving massive rave reviews. We've seen them on YouTube, haven't we? How much praise Aune's latest products have been receiving, from their headphone amplifiers through to their headphones and finally their earbuds. All of their products have been receiving massive praise by all those people that have been reviewing them. And it makes sense that they release these type of products, that they've been concentrating specifically on the headphone market. Because as we're fully aware, the headphone market in Asia is absolutely massive. It seems there is a huge interest in these type of products. So obviously, for marketing reason and for business purposes, it makes sense for Aune to concentrate on that type of market. And we see it is a market, a part of the audio market that has shown massive increase over the past decade or so. But here in the UK, and me personally, being of the generation that I am, a Generation Xer, I grew up listening to what I would class as traditional hi-fi systems. By a traditional hi-fi system, I'm talking about listening through a pair of loudspeakers. Now, I'm going to hold my hands up and I'm going to admit straight off of the bat that I much prefer listening to a pair of loudspeakers than what I do headphones. To illustrate this, if you go to a concert, and for example, you go to a concert and you've gone to see, I don't know, let's think of some very famous band that everybody knows in concert. Let's think of, I don't know, the Beatles, The Who, Iron Maiden, AC/DC, Prince, Michael Jackson. The list goes on and on. And when you go to that concert, what do you listen through? You listen through a pair of loudspeakers, don't you? So for me, loudspeakers has always been a priority when it comes to listening to music. Like I say, here in the UK, I think we've got a very long history and a long tradition of manufacturers who produce absolutely outstanding loudspeakers. We're known for it in the UK, the amount of top quality loudspeaker manufacturers we have. But now we live in a market where the audio market to me has become very, very saturated. It doesn't matter what product you want to manufacture, that particular aspect of the market will be absolutely saturated. And I think this is true specifically with earbuds. The earbud market, it seems to me that there is a new pair of earbuds that get released to the market on a weekly basis. There's just so many brands now that are releasing earbuds. There's so many brands now that are releasing headphones. It's like a total saturation of the market. But I'm digressing a little bit here. As I said in my introduction, the Aune really surprised me last week when I sent them an email, because I knew the Aune were about to release a new DAC, and I was excited about this new DAC because it was a pure hi-fi DAC. Again, like I said, Aune have been concentrating over the past few years where everything has had a headphone socket in it. Like I said, I understand why they would make this decision to include headphone sockets, but I, as what I would call like a pure audiophile and an old school audiophile, I wanted a pure DAC from the brand. And the last pure DAC that Aune released was the S8. And that S8, now Aune aren't like a traditional Chinese brand. What do I mean by they're not a traditional Chinese brand? By that I mean that we know there's certain Chinese brands that will release a new DAC what seems like every 6 months. You just buy one DAC, and just when you think you've got their latest product, boom, along comes another new DAC, and you can feel a little bit hard done by, can't you, when that kind of thing happens? But that doesn't particularly happen with Aune. Aune tend to release new products every 2 to 3 years. But I've been waiting, like I said, for this new DAC from Aune, a pure HiFi DAC without any headphone sockets on it. I've been waiting for, when did the S8 come out? Probably about 4 or 5 years ago now. Time really does fly. But then, like I said, finally Aune delivered. It was great news to know that Aune were about to release a new DAC. And that new DAC is the S18 Evo. As you all know, Aune followers, that all the latest products now come under the Evolution tag. Again, I'm digressing here. Why was I surprised when I actually spoke and tried to make an order for the S18? Well, I was surprised because the sales girl at Aune, who is called Candy, informed me that Aune, actually, they kept this very top secret. And they've got a new product, and it is actually, would you believe it? This has been a big surprise, like I said, that Aune now are going to release a brand new pair of loudspeakers. How good is that? Excellent. Fantastic news. Now, I've been working with Aune probably coming up for around 10, 11 years now, and I remember just before I started working with Aune, they did actually have a pair of loudspeakers in their catalogue. I don't know what happened to them, but obviously they were discontinued. And if I can recall correctly, the name of that loudspeaker was the X3. It was a very small desktop loudspeaker, and it was a loudspeaker that you would call a wideband loudspeaker, and it was very similar to the very, very popular at the time John Blue JB3. Do you remember that loudspeaker? John Blue. John Blue were from Taiwan, and they used to partner quite a lot with another Taiwanese brand called King Rex. And King Rex had the T20, and the T1020 was a tri-path based amplifier. So you had the T20, and it was always matched along as a combo. Put the two together, the T20 and the DAC, and it would connect up to the John Blue JB3. And the JB3, they were absolutely fantastic, very affordable, little wideband speakers. Unfortunately, John Blue and King Rex no longer exist. But that was the first speaker I remember Aune releasing. Like I said, I never heard it. It was a little bit before my time, but it was a wideband loudspeaker, and it was called the X3. And then it was discontinued. And since then, Aune hadn't released another pair of loudspeakers. So I was absolutely delighted when I heard that Aune were turning back again to what I would again call the traditional old school hi-fi market and release a pair of loudspeakers. Fantastic news. But the news gets even better, because not only are these a pair of loudspeakers, they are a pair of active loudspeakers. And to me, I think active loudspeakers are the ideal loudspeaker for the time period that we are currently living in and the sort of house conditions that we are currently living in. Because, again, talking about the UK, here in the UK, generally the houses are terraced houses. And a terraced house means that you've got a neighbour to your left of you and you've got a neighbour to the right of you. And generally, you can probably hear the neighbour to the left of you and the neighbour to the right of you. So you have to be very conscious of how loud you play your music, because if you play it too loud, you're going to upset your neighbours. And it's not just the UK that has this problem, because when I lived in Spain, it was exactly the same with the pisos that people live in there. Apartments, flats, because sound travels from one property through to the next property. So we have to be very conscious of not upsetting our neighbours with big, massive loudspeakers and playing our music too loud. And the Aune, the new speaker is called the AS5. And what's so good about this loudspeaker is the size of it, because again, like I said, here in the UK we are very limited by the size of our houses, because generally in the UK, most people, we live in rabbit hutches as houses. Every single room in our house is absolutely tiny. And if you're lucky, if you're very, very lucky, you might get a 4x3 living room. If you've got an older property, you might be blessed with a 5x4. But in general, houses here in the UK, the size of our living room, we just don't have the space anymore. Houses are more expensive and smaller in size. So we need a small pair of loudspeakers that aren't going to upset our neighbours and they aren't going to take over our living space. We need to keep our hi-fi. Generally, like I said, unless you're very blessed, generally we need to keep our hi-fi miniature and small. And like I said, Aune have delivered perfectly with the brand new AS5 active loudspeakers. Now I do have another pair of loudspeakers here that are active and I love them, and they're the Audi Maxim. Now, being dyslexic, I'm going to get these two brands confused because the names of them are very, very similar. The Audi Maxim are S5. And like I said, the Aune are AS5. So it's going to confuse my very easily confused brain. Now, the A5 from Audi Maxim are... Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare the two loudspeakers. I'm at the moment, I'm just currently in my office telling you about this new product from them. But I'm going to show you the two loudspeakers side by side, and you can sort of see for yourself the difference between the Audi Maxim and the Aune. Now, when I was first speaking to Candy, we're getting our lines crossed a little bit here because I thought that the price, when she gave me the price, I thought that was the price per speaker, but that isn't the case. The price of the speakers are for a pair. So they're not direct competition to the Audi Maxim because the Audi Maxim are in fact double the price of the Aune. So I was interested when they came to compare the two, how they would sort of compare to each other, which one was the better out of these two. Now the problem that I guess most importers, audio importers from Europe, are fully aware of the shipping costs from China. It is becoming extremely expensive bringing in products. It is absolutely brutal nowadays, the cost of importing goods from China. And with the things that are going on in the world and the things that are happening on a daily basis, the prices of transportation seems to be increasing on a weekly basis, and it's becoming, like I said, very, very expensive to ship from China at the moment. And the downside is that obviously with them being a pair of loudspeakers, it does sort of make them quite heavy. So unfortunately, because like I said, the shipping costs, it's eye-watering how much you have to pay to bring them in. Unfortunately, it does increase the price, the final product price of these loudspeakers. But nevertheless, I feel with the new Aune, you are getting a fantastic value for money. And like I said, I absolutely rate active loudspeakers. And the reason that I rate active loudspeakers is because you can now have a complete Aune system of just two boxes. That is if you don't listen to vinyl and you don't want a pair of headphones. But you can enjoy a full Aune system of the N5 Evo streamer, and you can connect it directly to the active A5 loudspeakers. And the beauty of that system is it's small and it is extremely affordable. And with it being an Aune product, you know you're going to get excellent sound quality. So it's a win-win for everybody. Small size, excellent value for money, and top audiophile sound quality. So I've been rambling on here for the past 20 minutes. I now think it's time that we go and have a look at the new AS5 and A5. So the AS5, there you go again. Like I told you, I'll get confused with the name. Now, those who are very observant, you might notice something to the left and right to me. There, if you can see them, they're a little bit low down. You can actually see these brand new speakers from Aune. But like I said, let's now go and take a closer look at the brand new S5 from Aune Audio. So now we arrive at the moment that we've all eagerly been waiting for. I'm showing you the brand new Aune AS5 active loudspeakers. You get a choice of two finishes. Let's start off by telling you about the finishes you can get. You can get two finishes. Now, Candy at Aune actually told me they were silver, but to my eyes, these definitely look like white. So it seems you've got a choice of two finishes, either black or white. There by the side of it is the speakers I was telling you about, and these are the Audio Maxim. These are active loudspeakers as well. These are the A5s. And you can compare that in size to the brand new Aune AS5. Now, the names of these, saying A5 and AS5, are going to be extremely confusing for somebody like me. So please bear with me, as I'll probably get a little bit tongue-tied and get the names mixed up back to front, and goodness knows what else I'm capable of doing. Now, when we look at those two speakers, I don't know about you, but when I look at the brand new Aune, it definitely reminds me, if you look at that driver there, and the design of it, it looks a little bit Kefish to me. What do you think? However, it's a very nice looking loudspeaker. We compare it there, like I said, to the Audio Maxim. We notice straight away that the Audio Maxim is smaller in size. Let me tell you about the pricing of the two. At the moment, I'm not 100% sure what I'm going to be pricing the Aune at. And I'm a little bit stuck, to be honest with you, knowing what price to put them at. And the reason is simply because of the extremely high shipping costs. Obviously, unfortunately, those shipping costs need to be included. And I say, because it's so expensive bringing in hi-fi products, especially loudspeakers, that unfortunately it will affect the final price. And I'm not 100% sure yet what that is going to be. The weight of the loudspeaker, it's 8 kilo. So a box of them, obviously you get two a pair, is 16 kilos. So you can, just off the top of your head, you can appreciate how expensive it is to bring in a few pairs of loudspeakers at 16 kilos each. It soon adds up, and that price, believe me, becomes extremely expensive. Comparing the finish of the two, let me just start by saying that the Audio Maxim is double in price. The Audio Maxim, again, it's expensive. They also are made in China. They come from China. Again, it's an expense to bring these loudspeakers in, but these are 1,200, I think it's £1,250. The Aune are basically then half the price of the Audio Maxim. Looking at the construction, the Audio Maxim are, you can tell when you pick them up that the Audio Maxim are heavier, stronger, more inert, but the quality of the Aune is extremely nice. I think it probably looks nicer in a wood finish. You've got this sort of, if I can just touch it there, nice and inert. It does come in this, say, it's a matte finish. It's not shiny. I do like the matte finish. I like the matte finish because it doesn't show up your fingerprints. And it also looks like it's not a dust magnet. You can see on the top here, they've been downstairs in my demo listening room, these Audio Maxim, and they've got a little bit of dust on them. But the Aune definitely aren't going to be showing up fingerprints and collecting dust. On the front there, we've got a little light. You'll see that. That's obviously when you power the loudspeaker on and off. So you've got a soft dome tweeter in that. I think it's a 5.5 inch driver. Now you might be thinking, oh, 5.5 inch driver, it's tiny. It's not going to produce any bass. But let me reassure you, just by listening to these Maxim, they're both active loudspeakers, but don't be put off thinking you're not going to get a good sound because it's got a tiny little main driver. I've got NHT Super Zeros, 5-inch driver, magnificent sounding loudspeakers. Maxim, a tiny 5.5-inch driver. The punch on the Maxim loudspeakers, and that beautiful AMT tweeter. These are fabulous sounding loudspeakers. So again, don't be put off by that small size driver. Don't feel you're going to be shortchanged when it comes to bass quality, because believe me, you're not. Okay, it doesn't go down to Hades, it doesn't thump you in the chest, but believe me, they produce top quality bass. So there we can compare the size of the two. Now I'm just going to scan over here and I'm going to show you what the rear of the loudspeaker looks like. We can take a closer look here, and you can see this is a design where you don't, I repeat, you do not have a master loudspeaker and a slave. These are two mono independent active loudspeakers. And on the back you have your two connections. You have your RCA and you have your XLR. So you've got two options of how you want to, or possibilities of connecting these loudspeakers. I repeat, through RCA or XLR. You'll also notice there's something to the left. You'll also notice a bass volume. Now, to be honest with you, I tested these out very briefly yesterday, a couple of hours. And to be honest with you, I think Aune have done a good job here, because when you adjust the bass here, let me just keep that in focus, that one there, you've got, if you can see that, -5 up to +2. To be honest with you, there isn't a huge difference. It is very subtle, the difference that control there makes, which it's a good thing, because it doesn't mean you're going to go crazy on the bass. It's not going to ruin the sound. It's a subtle, very quite difficult. Does that make sense? Very quite difficult? It doesn't, does it? But it's very difficult to actually notice the difference when you use that control there. Again, you've got your power cord. It comes with UK mains power cord, 200 volt to 240, which covers the UK voltage. We know it's a little bit higher here in the UK than what it is in the rest of Europe. And there, obviously, you've got your on-off switch. So that's basically it on the rear of the loudspeaker. And like I said, just going to show you, you've seen this before, that is the Aune N5, the one on the top there, the N5 Evo, and that is a streamer. So you've got beautiful little system of just the N5. Below it you've got the clock, so you can add the NC1 clock if you so wish, but if just to get you started, you can use the one box there on the top, the N5 Evo, and a pair of active loudspeakers. Put it in your house and start enjoying fantastic music. Doesn't take up hardly any space, sounds fantastic, and what's even better, it does, I think both of them will come in under £1,000. You've got a top-notch sounding hi-fi system for under £1,000. What's not to like? And I've got the grills here. Let me just stretch over here. And I'm just going to put it on the top there. Hang on, see, I don't know if I can hold the camera and put the grill on at the same time. I have to be Harry Houdini here to do this. There we go, look at that. Sorry about that. There we go. There you've got a very nice pair of grills in case you've got little children in your house that like to stick their fingers in things and damage your tweeters. You've got grills to protect them. It doesn't have to be children, sometimes it's adults as well. It would surprise you. People that like touching tweeters. Oh, God, it's infuriating when you come back and you see your tweeters are being poked in. Like I said, I have given these a very quick try out. They still need running in, but they do have that typical aune house sound. Now, they're not as good as the Audio Maxim, obviously. Audio Maxim are double in price. You will notice that they haven't got the punch or that treble extension, that beautiful treble on the Audio Maxim. But these do have that typical aune house sound. And by that I mean smooth, natural, warm and engaging. But like I said, they still need running in. I still need to give them a few hours listening, get accustomed to them, try them with some different equipment, try them in a different room, etc, etc. But they are just my first impression of these loudspeakers. And if you live in the UK near Somerset, come on, get yourself over here. Give these loudspeakers a listen. I think you will be pleasantly surprised at just how good they are. So pop along and visit us here at Eden Audio, where you can hear the full range, because we've also got the new A19 high-end headphone amplifier, very exciting, and like I said earlier, we've got that hot S18 Evo DAC. So get your backsides over here and give them a listen. Thanks for watching, everyone. Take care, and I hope you've enjoyed this little presentation of the hot brand new aune AS5 active loudspeaker.